It's a God thing. I am so grateful to be here talking about wake up, your passion is calling. And when I was little, a long time ago, decades ago, my mother would wake me up in the morning and sing, "Good morning, good morning. You slept the whole night through. Good morning to you," from Singing in the Rain. And so that's what I am saying to you. And it brought back a memory to me. Decades ago, when I was living in Hawaii, and for a while I was living in Hanakapiai Valley in a cave. And then I eventually moved to 5 houses in a village in Kalihiwai in the cane fields. And one morning I was sleeping and I was awakened at 6 in the morning hearing men's voices singing. And I ran to the window, and what did I see? A garbage wagon. They had a garbage wagon with Hawaiian men standing up in the wagon, collecting the garbage from the homes and singing Hawaiian songs to their heart's content. Oh, yes, they were doing their passion. And so recently I was listening to Alan Watts, and what he said was, get paid for playing. That's what you need to do. You need to get paid for playing. Yes, indeed. And so these beautiful Hawaiian men were getting paid for playing. And Thoreau says, do what you love. We heard that before. And then he goes on to say, know your own bone. Like a dog with a bone, know your own bone, gnaw at it, bury it, unearth it, and gnaw at it still. So in order to find our own bone, we are needing to find our passion and gnaw at it all our lives. So one of my very, very super duper favorite passions is people. So last Friday, I had a really fabulous event. I went for my annual checkup with my doctor. And so I was sitting in the waiting room and I was looking around. All the waiting room was filled with all kinds of people, all ages, all shapes, all ethnicities. And I decided to do something my Zen master taught me years ago. So I found a woman who was about my age, and I said to myself in the soul, my sister, and then a man, my brother, and then younger people, my daughter, my son, and then my granddaughter, my grandson, and even my baby. Someone had a baby, and it made me feel so good. And when I visited my doctor, she asked me to have blood work, and I hadn't had blood work for a long, long time. So I went into the laboratory and checked in, and then I went into the inner sanctum where they were going to take my blood, and I noticed how beautiful these vials are. They're arranged in colors, red, orange, yellow. And then the woman who was going to take my blood said, hi, Rainbow, you lived in a cave in Hawaii. And I thought, what? Her name was Donna, and she had taken my blood over a year ago. So finally, I gave her a big hug. And you know that my visit to the doctor turned into quite an adventure because I was living my passion, which is people. So today we're going to have an acronym. Jean and I love to do acronyms. So our acronym today is PAC, P-A-C, and it's not a physician's assistant. The P stands for, you guessed it, passion. The A stands for something that Dennis Merritt Jones encouraged us to do, to be aware, and aware. And the C should really be a triple C. It was hard for me to focus on which one to choose, but I chose choice. I chose choice for the C, but it could also have been change or curiosity, triple C, but primarily it's choice. And you know, Viktor Frankl, the man who survived Auschwitz, said, he told us that between stimulus and response, there's a space. Between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space lies our freedom and power to choose a response. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and we get to choose what goes into that space. And when I was just thinking of Viktor Frankl, it always makes me remember Abraham Maslow and Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie said the following. He said, two men looked out from behind bars. One saw mud and the other saw all stars. One saw mud and the other saw stars. So they could choose how they wanted to respond to being behind bars. Now, I have a painting by Connie Adcock, and it's called If Only, and it's a lovely woman just lying back and looking very kind of pensive. And it reminded me of a small poem I wrote years ago, and the poem was called If Only, the same thing the painting's called, and it went like this. If only it were Friday, the woman said. Friday came, and her eyes lit up a moment, and then, if only it were Monday. Yes, indeed. Are we thinking of what could only happen if only? Or are we here with who we are, appreciating the moment? And Reverend Mary read so beautifully a quote by Lisa Carson, the minister of the Thailand CSL, and she said, many people don't know what is my passion? What am I passionate about? And she suggested we substitute the word joy for passion. And so sometimes when we watch children playing, you know, they are filled with joy, with passion. And it's just, they aren't self-conscious. They're living their joy and their passion. So once upon a time, a businessman called his staff, and they looked through the window, and they had been looking at children crawling around and playing on top of a Lamborghini. Do you know what a Lamborghini is? It's $1 million car, and children were playing on top of it. And the businessman said to his staff, he said, the Lamborghini, the $1 million car, is nothing compared to the joy of children. And they were looking out the window at these children crawling around and playing. And he continued to allow the children to play and jump on top of this Lamborghini. But the thing is, the kids were not his, and neither was the Lamborghini. So anyhow, we don't need to wait to experience passion or to experience life for the right moment. What we need to do is do our best to just stop at this moment and see what passion, what joy comes up for us. So right now, just for this microsecond, let's stop. And just for a moment, let's close our eyes and see what joy are we feeling this moment? Okay, let's come out of that Personally, I'm feeling ecstasy and bliss to be with you all y'all this morning. That's what I'm feeling. There's a story going around about 3 bricklayers, brick masons, working on a project together. And so when somebody asked the first brick mason, "What are you building?" And he was kind of gruff in his answer. And he said, "I'm laying bricks." Like, duh, can't you see that? And they asked the second one, "Well, what are you building?" And the second one says, "I'm building a wall." And the third one, they asked, "What are you building?" And he said, "I'm building a cathedral," because he had vision, and that's what he was building. So now I'd like to revert back to one of my favorite poets, Rumi. You know I love Hafiz, but today I am referring back to what Rumi says. Rumi says, "If you want a rose, don't hide from the thorns. If you want love, don't hide from yourself. With passion, pray. With passion, make love. With passion, eat and drink and dance and play. Why look like a dead fish in the ocean? I don't want to look like a dead fish in the ocean." And then he goes on to say, "If you want the moon, don't hide from the night. If you want a rose, don't hide from the thorns. And if you want love, don't hide from yourself." Wow, thank you, Rumi. So that reminded me of something called the parable of the rose. A certain man planted a rose and began watering it faithfully before it blossomed. And then he examined it and he saw that the bud had a lot of thorns upon the stem of it. And he thought, how can a beautiful flower like a rose have thorns in its stem? And so it depressed him so much, he stopped watering it. And when it was ready to bloom, he saw that, quote, it had made its transition. It had died. And so it is with many of us. Within every soul, there's a rose. Did you know you have a rose growing inside of your soul? The godlike qualities planted in us at birth, it grows amid the thorns of things that are our challenges. So many of us look at ourselves and all we see is the thorns, the defects. We despair. We think that nothing good can ever come from us, that there isn't enough for us. And we neglect to water the beautiful, good things within us. And eventually, whatever there dries up. We never realize our true potential. So one of the greatest gifts a person can give another person is to reach out past the thorns of the other person and find the rose within them and remind them of their beauty and their nobility. We can help them realize that they can overcome their faults and their fears, and we can show them their rose. Guess what? We can also do that for ourselves. We can display our rose also. You know, Pam Grout is a fabulous author, and she has a column, and recently she had a column that asked us, do you want a piece of toast? Do you want a piece of toast? Well, put the toast in the toaster and you still don't get the piece of toast. Well, that's because the toaster isn't plugged in. So she goes on to say, she calls God the dude. And she says, the dude's gifts are sure, eternal, changeless, limitless, forever giving out, extending love and adding to my never-ending joy. But I'm not receiving it because my toaster's not plugged in. I'm not on the same frequency. And she says, all this good stuff is always there waiting for us. So all we have to do is plug in our toaster. And she said, my goodness, if I am on the same vibration, if I can get my boombox on the right frequency, the universe is going to show up snorting and paying and ready to move into my life. So when I'm thinking about all these things about cause and effect and what have you, you know who comes to my mind? Abraham Maslow. When he created something called the hierarchy of needs. Have you ever heard of it? It's like a pyramid. And if the needs at the bottom are met and so forth, finally we can get to the top. But recently, he redid and expanded this hierarchy. And I'd like to tell you the new needs that he has added to the hierarchy of needs, plus the old ones. Number one, physiological needs. If our physiological needs are met. Number two, our safety needs. Number three, our love and belonging needs. Number four, our esteem needs. Number five, our cognitive needs, which he calls knowledge and understanding. 6, our aesthetic needs are met, symmetry and appreciation of beauty. Need number 7 used to be at the top of this pyramid, and it was called self-actualization. Well, he's added a new need at the top. So number 8, he calls transcendence needs. Isn't this fabulous? He calls transcendent needs. Transcendence needs religion, mystical beliefs, ethics, and science. It really brings to mind that quote by Ernest Holmes that reminds us that there's a new birth that comes through a new outlook on life. A new outlook, a new way of thinking, a new sense of our relationship to our environment, to the people around us, to ourselves, and to God. Which brings to mind Max Planck, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics. And you know what he said? He said, when you change the way you look at things, guess what? The things you look at change. One of those beautiful C's. So another one of my passions, the first one was people, is nature. I am passionate about nature. I could lie down under a tree and look up at a tree for hours at a time. And recently, I spent hours just watching a spider spin its web. It was phenomenal. It was spinning its web, its house out of itself. It was so geometric, so perfect. Think of it. Are any of you plant people? Are any of you outdoors people? Think of it. If you hadn't planted that flower, if you hadn't planted that bush, then that bee or that butterfly wouldn't have had a place to land and participate in this thing called life. You are participating in this thing called life because Rumi reminds us that everything in the universe is within you. Ask all from yourself. And don't you know yet, he says, it is your light that lights the world. So sometimes we need to just stop and step outside ourselves, says Tim Tebow Shaken, and pay attention to the world around us and do something, no matter how small, to lighten somebody's load, to lighten our own load. So this week for your homework, we go through, this is what I want you to do this week for homework. As Dennis Merritt Jones says, I want you to be aware of what you're doing. You know, that space between cause and effect. I want you to be aware of what you're doing, what you're thinking, aware of what you're experiencing. Does that time disappear when you're doing it? Are you smiling? Are you peaceful? Before you respond, do you take a deep breath and allow love to orchestrate what you're responding? Wow, what fabulous homework to be aware. So in conclusion, don't you love those two words? I want you to share with you a poem which has meant so much to me and touched my deep soul. It's called The Park Bench by Roger Knapp. The park bench was deserted as I sat down to read. Beneath the straggly branches of an old willow tree, disillusioned by life with good reason to frown, for the world was intent on dragging me down. And if that weren't enough to ruin my day, a young boy approached me all tired from play. He stood right before me with his head tilted down and said with great excitement, "Look what I found." In his hand was a flower, and what a pitiful sight, with its petals all worn, lacking rain, lacking light. Wanting him to take it and go off and play, I faked a small smile and then shifted away. But instead of retreating, he sat next by my side and placed the flower to his nose, declaring with surprise, "It sure smells pretty, and it's beautiful too." And then he just kept smelling that beautiful, beautiful rose. That's why I picked it here for you. The weed before me was dying or dead, not a vibrant of colors, orange, yellow, or red. But I knew I must take it, or he might never leave. So I reached for the flower and said, "Just what I need." But instead of him placing the flower in my hand, he held it high in midair without reason or plan. It was then that I noticed for the very first time that weed-toting boy could not see. He was blind. I heard my voice quiver. Tears shone like the sun as I thanked him for picking the very best one. "You're welcome," he smiled and then ran off to play, unaware of the impact he had made on my day. I sat there and wondered how he managed to see a self-pitying man 'neath an old willow tree. How did he know of my self-indulged plight? Perhaps from his heart he'd been blessed with true sight. Through the eyes of a blind child, at last I could see the problem was not with the world, but with me. And for all of those times I myself had been blind, I vowed to appreciate every second that is mine. And then I held that wilted flower to my nose and breathed in the fragrance of a beautiful rose and smiled watching that young boy, a new weed in his hand, about to change the life of a very sad old man. Won't you join me in prayer? Let us be mindful of our breath as we go into treatment. And as I affirm that all of God is present right here, isn't that just all of the dude? All of God is present right here, right now, breathing us. Isn't that just fabulous. And we contain all the attributes of God. And the one I choose one of the C's to use right now is speaking my word. And I speak my word for all the people with me right here, all the people watching later, and all the people of planet Earth. I speak my word for all of us, knowing that our lives are individualized expressions of God, and only we and only perfectly us have that vibration. Always had it, has it, and will have it eternally, that beautiful vibration of God's love as we express God, knowing that our physical bodies are God's body. Yes, indeed, and perfect, functioning in every system and every action and every joint. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Everything is in balance. And in case there is an appearance of something that's not perfect, what I know at this microsecond, that appearance is easily and effortlessly and harmoniously, instantaneously eliminated from us, and only our perfect body remains. We are all perfect emotionally. We are centered. We are grounded. There is more than enough prosperity for each of us because we are God's expression. There's more than enough good. There is more than enough communication with spirit, that each of us has a beautiful, open, receptive communication with spirit as we go forth to do the things that need to be done this day joyfully. We experience joy in every facet of our lives, and therefore we are passionate about being alive as one of God's expressions in this beautiful thing we call life. It is so good knowing that our relationships are harmonious and that our prosperity is more than enough as we go forth. I'm so grateful revealing this about all of us as I release my word into that fabulous law of the universe, which instantaneously manifests it, even as I am now speaking. As together we say, and so it is. Amen and amen.